Thanks, Shah. Mark and the organising committee, thank you for making it possible for me to be here today and to talk a bit about the collaboration that we've been running around mGlu2 and of which, as you've already heard, Athena has played such a major part. I have to admit, I really knew Athena as a scientific collaborator. And having heard about the rest of her life, I'm really regretting that I didn't know her better in that regard. And you've already heard how good a collaborator she was, and it's very easy for me to just reiterate that. But unlike Danny, I haven't been in industry for 31 years. I've only been in industry for 30 years. And during that time, I've had an awful lot of collaborations. And it is absolutely the truth that Athena was a tremendous person to collaborate with. And from the perspective of an industry scientist, the reason for saying that is, many times when you collaborate externally, the motivation is funding, not science. Or you're viewed as maybe having some ulterior motives that might cloud the collaboration in some way. Or maybe your internal science is not quite as strong as it could be, let's say. None of those things mattered with Athena. She was focused purely on the science, on driving it forward, and on a true collaboration. She was open, she was collegiate, and this is exactly the way we want it to be. So, you'll see the other player in this collaboration is Phil Skolnick. And, of course, he plays an important part in all of this. I know he really wanted to be here today. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. He asked me to send his apologies and his best wishes. And, those of you that know Phil and knew Athena can just imagine what kind of fun you can have in that kind of collaborative group. Okay, now, what do I do, Joe? Sorry? Okay, great. So, this is how we started. So, we were interested in mGlu2 as a target. This is around 99, 2000. We're interested in all metabotropic glutamate receptors, actually. mGlu2 especially because it had this role in modulating glutamatergic transmission through its predominantly presynaptic action. And early on there were, I think, good rationales for a number of psychiatric indications. Actually, with this type of mechanism, you can pretty much build a rationale for any psychiatric indication, but that's by the by. We were aware of the strong biology around addiction. And, when we first thought about this, we went to our senior management group. We tried to persuade them that actually, out of all of this, addiction is the place to go. Barry has been involved in some of these discussions. We could never gain traction. And it wasn't about the basic science, it was about everything else, commercial, clinical, and so on. So we ended up going for schizophrenia. The compound in the bottom left was the lead compound that came out of that program. We had a whole range of compounds. We took that one forward through early development and into a phase 2 study in schizophrenia, and you can see the result there where risperidone, the lower part of the graph, gives a positive result, and AZD8529 is entirely overlaid with placebo. And before and since, there have been a number of other studies that have shown a similar outcome. And you'll see from the title, there's about 11 or 12 years of work and a lot of people and money that have gone into that. George Koob was talking about writing grants and the relation to addiction. positive reinforcement, and anhedonia. And it struck me as he was talking that this is another example. I've always asked myself, why do I keep doing this? I think it's, I would say learned helplessness or something else, but I think it's addiction. And I think Phil would agree with me on that. So we hit a very clear failure to demonstrate efficacy in schizophrenia. But whilst that study was running, we were able, despite not being able to convince our senior management that addiction was a viable way forward, we were able to get some support to do some preclinical studies. And of course, we went to Athena as a collaborator to run those studies. I won't go through these in a lot of detail. You can read it. It's been published fairly recently. So Athena, of course, had already at this time published on non-selective agonists. She'd published on Bina, the mGlu2 modulator from Vanderbilt. And with our compound, she could show clear effect on nicotine self-administration, no effect on food-seeking behavior, so some selectivity there. And this effect was sustained for 14 days repeat treatment, which was important to us because, of course, we were aware of the data that she'd already published on direct-acting agonists and the loss of effect on repeat treatment, which I still don't think we really understand from a mechanistic or behavioural perspective, but I think that's another story. So it looked good. She went on, we looked at reinstatement following extinction, and again, a good effect of the compound, and again it was sustained over repeat dosing. This time it's only 5 days, but and Jar can comment on this. I mean, that was a heroic experiment from a technical perspective. And this experiment was particularly important to us at the time because we needed to persuade people not only that we had a viable mechanism, but we had a differentiated mechanism. And from what was available in the literature at the time, varenicline was inactive on reinstatement. So we could create a story around, actually I don't like using the word story, we could build a case around reinstatement, its relation maybe to craving, relapse prevention, and so on. And so we went back at that point to our senior management. And this is actually, it's modified, I've put too many additional words in, but this is actually a slide that we used for that interaction. So we talked to them about the preclinical models, how we felt that these preclinical models had some validity in terms of providing confidence of efficacy. We talked about the data that Athena had produced with the agonist and with other compounds around this mechanism, supporting the mechanism. And then we showed them the data that you have just seen on AZD8529 and proposed to them that this compound would be worthwhile to study further in a clinical setting. And they agreed. They didn't agree to fund it, but they agreed that we could go forward. Is this being taped? I should have asked before. And of course, at this point, as we'd been working with Athena, we were also working with Phil Skolnick and other scientists at NIDA. And so a natural extension of this was to work with NIDA to run a clinical study. And I'll talk about that in a couple of slides. So just a couple of other aspects. So working with NIDA, we also had a very nice collaboration with Susanna Justinova, who, as you know, is in the late Steve Goldberg's lab, who replicated all of the data that Athena had produced in rodents, in squirrel monkeys. Most importantly, the effective plasma concentrations in this model were very similar to the concentrations we had in the rat, and these were plasma exposures that we knew we could get to safely in man from the schizophrenia study. and are actually lower than the exposure we used in the schizophrenia study. So that was a great sort of addition. And then one other thing which we haven't really developed ourselves, but I think is important. So Athena, she, as we've heard, did a lot of work around cocaine. AZD8529 is also active in cocaine, but it's active in reinstatement but not self-administration. So there's a contrast there with nicotine, and there's a number of studies with cocaine, with methamphetamine, that we've run in collaboration which have shown that result. No effect on self-administration, but very potent on reinstatement. The bottom left-hand panel here is from some studies with Yavin Shaham on amphetamine craving, and then on the right-hand side with Marcus Heilig on ethanol, self-administration, and reinstatement. And again, it's active on reinstatement but not on self-administration. So one of the things I think we would have gone forward and explored is not just are these other addictions viable indications, but what are the mechanisms, what's the biology behind this? I have no idea about time, Jar, sorry. So this is the phase 2 study that we put in place, funded by NIDA. AstraZeneca supplied the drug, the regulatory documentation, scientific support, and so on. This study has now completed randomization. So all the patients are in, and we will get a readout pretty early next year. And it is a major disappointment that Athena won't be able to see the outcome of this study. So just to summarize, all that early work that we've heard about building this case for mGlu2 as a target for addiction, and particularly nicotine administration, a lot of it driven by Athena's lab, combined with the work that she did on AZD8529, was, I would say, the most important aspect of getting AstraZeneca to support that phase 2 study. And as I said, it's unfortunate that she won't see the outcome of that. The other, I think, major impact that she had on this is a lot of big pharma are very resistant, as you know, to getting into addiction, despite the medical need, despite the basic science, the researchability. And I think she, more than anyone, has been a key player in trying to shift that prejudice. And she certainly did that with AstraZeneca. The other regret that I have in all of this, or one of the other regrets, is the head of research at AstraZeneca is a Greek. He's an excellent scientist. He's very challenging. He's very outspoken. And I think if we hadn't got approval to go forward, my next step would have been to bring Athena into the room with him. And I really would have liked to have seen that happen. So there we are. Thank you.